What is going on, everyone? Tutorial Tim here at Design Academy, and today we're going to be building out banner components. And without any further ado, the overview is just going to be discussing how to use these components by checking out the documentation, and then we'll be creating them ourselves, applying the proper naming convention, and even adding the proper constraints and maybe a little bit of auto layout. But we'll actually save that auto layout, an in-depth video on auto layout for the next section of the course, where we cover auto layout for all the components we've created in this section of the course, but with constraints. The only difference will be that the components are already made, and we'll be implementing auto layout on them in the next section of the course. So without any further ado, let's check out this banner documentation resource. And once that opens in your browser, go ahead and click on that little checkbox so it doesn't show up again for this website, as you'll be checking it out frequently. And here you can see that I got this a little too zoomed in. Whoops. And with that, banners display a prominent message and related optional actions. So here we have that prominent message appearing at the top, and then we have related optional actions to take based upon what is said in that prominent message. And you can go ahead and understand the usage here, and it also discusses similar components, and based on the priority of the message being conveyed, you can utilize a certain type of component. So for banners, typically when there is a prominent or medium level type of priority based on the level of severity, if that priority is prominent or medium, it is typically you typically use a banner, and they will banners remain until dismissed by the user, or if the state that caused the banner is resolved. And there's some differences described here with snack bars, and then the dialog component as well. And a banner displays an important succinct message and provides actions for users to address or dismiss that banner. It requires a user action to be dismissed, and they should be displayed at the top of the screen below the top at bar, and they are persistent and non-modal, allowing the user to either ignore them or interact with them at any time. Only one banner should be shown at a time. Here are some principles and the anatomy of one of the most complex banner. As you can see, the most complex banner has a container with a supporting illustration, which you could also reference as a leading icon or an informative icon. Those are also common terms used. So this supporting illustration, and then here we have that container encapsulating all of these elements in this design. And then we have the text, of course, and then we have the buttons, our supporting actions. And here are some examples of how to use it and how to not use it. Only one banner should be shown at a time. Any banner appears above content and below the app bar. So here's the content right here below those images, the collection of those images. And then here we have the top app bar, and it fits right in between. So you could think of it as always below the top app bar is where it would appear. And here's some more usages I recommend you going through to really understand the placement and behavior, as that is very important. And then I have these screenshots on the specs on how to implement this. And we can go ahead and reference the text style that we need. And the text style we need, as you can see here, is the body 2 text style. And we'll go ahead and go into Figma now and start building these out. And the first thing we're going to want to do is enable our material design system so we can start pulling in certain components that we've already built. So we built this text button. And with that said, let's go ahead and build that. So we have a frame, and in this exercise file, I've already created the naming convention on how we want to categorize these banners. As you can see, there are mobile and desktop variants. So we'll go ahead and create all of these. I'm going to go ahead and create a one or two in each section, and then I'll pause the video and have you test your skills and build them out by yourself in a systematized manner. So utilizing as many of the assets we've created already in our material design system here. So without any further ado, let's get started. So we have this mobile variant, right? So we have the text and the action inline, meaning that they're both on the same level. They're not stacked on top of each other. They're horizontally in line right there, both on the same axis, the x-axis, which is horizontal. And with that said, we can go ahead and just create a frame, and I'm going to rename this. And since I've copied that naming convention in that file, my layer will now be labeled it'll live under the mobile category as a one-line list, which has a text and action, and it is inline. It's not stacked. This is stacked, but this is a two-line example, as you can see, with the text stacked. The text is above those actions. And what we're going to need, first off, is our text button. So if we just type in text, we can find that text button there. In our assets panel, we can drag that in here. We can go ahead and rename this to action. And you'll notice that we already have auto layout applied to this button, so we don't have to manually resize it, which is very convenient. And we'll leave that off to the side for now. And let's justify the width here. Set that to 360, which adheres to mobile principles for Android, as Material Design was created for Android in the beginning. So with that specified, let's go ahead and specify the height to 54 pixels. Now that we have the height specified, one thing we will also need later on is the divider. So if I go in my assets panel and look for the divider that we've already created, I can drag that in here, and we already have the width specified, and it has the proper color style that we need. I can just I'm going to go to that main component real quick and detach this unnecessary turned off text style, fill color style. And I'm going to go ahead and publish this, and we'll be good to go. Add rail variants. So now that that's published and it's successfully published, I can go ahead and update the component here. As you can see, it's now updated. It doesn't contain that background layer, that fill, because it's unnecessary. We utilize a stroke here, and we can just go ahead and, if you pay attention closely to the designs, you may or may not need this banner to have a divider. As you can see, there's a divider being communicated right there between the content and the top app bar right there. So just keep that in mind, and what we can do is we can offer this, and then designers can copy this component and then turn it off if need be. So we can offer that. So that's the first thing I'm going to add to all of them. I've just snapped that to the bottom of this frame by holding down Option S, since that is a child element of the parent frame. I can easily snap this as needed to the top or the bottom. So now that I have that set there, I'm going to set the constraints to bottom, left, and right. So that way, if this were to ever be stretched, that divider will stretch with. But we have this defined here, and we won't need to modify that as we are developing the system for Android in this scenario. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and drag in this button here, snap it to the left, and it's 8 pixels from the right, and it is centered vertically on the y-axis here. So that is set accordingly. And then I'm going to add the constraint to the right of the parent frame. So the constraint will stick to the right of its parent frame, and then it will be centered vertically. So whenever it is stretched, it will always stay center in relation to the height, either decreasing or increasing. And then we'll go ahead and specify the text. So the text, again, is we're going to go ahead and add a color style here first, text and iconography, and use the high emphasis text color style. And then we'll go ahead and specify body 2 for this typography. And then if we just type in one line, just mimic what is written there in that spec, one line string with one action. Whoopsie, can't type here. With one action, we should be good to go. So with that specified, I'm going to go ahead and center this here, snap this to the left with my shortcut key, Option A, and Option V to center vertically. And then I'm going to move this over to 16. So the padding is set to 16 dips right there, and that is centered. And with that centered, our content is good to go. And you can see that Material Design specifies that the text box is specifically has a spacing of 36 pixels right here. So what we can do is right now it's set to 48 from the text button itself. So we can go ahead and hold down Command and stretch out that text box to be set to, so the spacing is set to 36. So now it's set to 36, here the spacing. What we're going to need to do to ensure that that is fixed is that we can go ahead with constraints and set this to left and right, so those constraints are maintained if this were to ever be stretched. And we don't necessarily have to worry about that right now. I'm going to set the typography also to be centered vertically on the y-axis, so that is in alignment with the action that is inline to the right of it. So if designers ever have a need for expanding this, that won't mess up their designs. So with that specified, we are good to go. I'm not showing you auto layout because I will show you that in the next section of the course. That will be its own focus where you will master that. I really want you to understand the concepts of constraints in this section of the course and just the general construction of these components as well. Adding auto layout into the mix can be very taxing and confusing on top of all of this dense knowledge you're learning currently. So with the typography all specified and attached to their proper color styles and everything utilizing instances, we now need to go into the background of this frame and specify the color. So the color it is utilizing is the surface background. We can specify that as surface or surface background there. I'm going to set that to surface is surface. There we go. As that is a surface that is overlaid on top of the background. It's not the initial background for the entire page. It's just the surface for that banner component. So now that we've created this, we're going to go ahead and duplicate it, and then we're going to make this a component. So a main component. Now we have our main component. We have our first variant created, and let's go ahead and build out this 2-line variant with actions. So one thing to note is that we have to probably modify the line height of our text elements, because in the beginning when I created these text styles in our system, which I did intentionally for us to modify and pay attention to the line height of our typography to ensure that it's done correctly, because if it's not done correctly, the spacing of our typography will be off in components that are 2-line variants and whatnot. So let's go ahead and create, I'm going to move this screenshot over, create a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that naming convention, and I'm going to create this from scratch, a new frame set to a width of 360 and height of 112. Then I'm going to paste in the naming convention. We have the mobile version of the 2-line with text and actions banner variant, which is great. And now this uses a text style of body 2, but I'm going to go ahead and copy this action button, paste it, hold down Option S, Option D, and that'll snap to the bottom and right, and then move that up until the padding is set to 8 on the bottom and right. And then I'm going to duplicate this and ensure that padding is set to 8 there to the right from that element. And we have both of these elements here sticking to the right, and we want them to stick to the bottom as well of this component. So if it were ever to be stretched out, it would stick to that bottom and right spacing respectively, respective of its parent, which is the background. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and change the fill to surface, that background color. And now we got to go in and just justify the proper spacing for how our typography will fit. So I'm going to create this text box here, select the body 2 color style, and then I'm going to just kind of mimic what is in this component, the text in that component. 1 to 2 lines is preferable on mobile and tablet. Okay, great. So we have the text we need. Now we need to kind of specify a couple of things. So what we need to specify is that the baseline of the first line of text in this 2-line text is set to 36 dips, and this padding left is set to 16, as well as the padding on the right is set to, we can say 16 here in the scenario. So let's go ahead and snap that to the left there, push this content down slightly. So we got that set to 16, and I'm going to go ahead and push this over and ensure that that's set to 16 on the right. There, set the constraint to left and right and the top and bottom. And then we're going to need to justify the spacing here between these buttons and the text there, which is where we'll start to modify the line height potentially. So let's go ahead and pull out our rulers here, Shift R, and then I'm going to create a 36 pixel high rectangle to just reference where the baseline needs to be for this text. So I'm going to push this content down, and essentially it is right now currently stated at the text box has a padding on the top of 22 dips to achieve that 36 dip baseline there from the top, as you can see. And with that, we can even adjust this text box to ensure that it does not overlap or interfere with the actions below it. And it showcases that there's a spacing of 12 pixels from the baseline to the top of the button. So let's go ahead and double check that. And if that isn't the case, that is an indication of potentially our line height being off on the type style. So if I go ahead and create this, set that to 12, we are very close there. But it's 1 pixel off, the baseline's 1 pixel off. So essentially what we could do is go into our text style and modify that so it's set to 20. So if I go in and modify, go to the definition style, modify it to 20, and then publish that to my library. Publish, successfully published, and then I can update this. And once I update it, pay attention to the text here dropping down 1 pixel. And it actually dropped down more than 1 pixel. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo that style and just reference my body to text style, ensure that that's there. I'm gonna republish that change and just ensure that that updates again so that stays there. And I'm gonna live with that. I'm just 1 pixel off there, although I do think it's correct. And with that achieved look and feel, and you have all the spacing set properly and the proper color style on the text with the high emphasis text style applied, we should be good to go. So I can even hide my rulers or just remove them specifically from this layer. One thing we are missing is a divider. So I'm going to copy this divider here and then paste it and then hit Option S, and that will snap to the bottom of this element. And it has the constraints from the previous component we built. And then once I've built that out, we can test the constraints there, and you'll notice that the constraints are maintained in that spacing when I stretch out this element, and the divider sticks to where it needs to be. And once I'm satisfied with the responsiveness of this component, I am good to go. If you want to really be clear and concise, you can reorder the elements in your component, which is a great thing to do, as that will be easier to consume the components. And then we can go ahead and make this we can make that a master component. I'm going to duplicate it and pause this video and build out the third variant for the mobile version. So what you can do is modify this as needed. You can drag in a placeholder icon. So we could type in placeholder, and we have that placeholder, and we can round out the edges. So you could, now that we have that round icon, and you have a head start there and a clue. So I'll be right back. I've now created that third variant. I just had to increase the height to 120, add in that 40 by 40 dip icon, set that padding perspective in relation to what is indicated in the spec here. And I kind of it was very simple and straightforward. Nothing difficult there. I just ensure I have those right constraints set, and you should be good to go. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and make this a main component, and we're going to go ahead and create the desktop version. So with this one line variant here, we can go ahead and specify the height, and I just duplicated this first version that we created on mobile because it's essentially the same exact thing, but for desktop the width is specified at a much larger, the width there. And what we can do is set that width to 720 now, and the nice thing about this is our constraints will adapt accordingly, so we'll still have that spacing there needed, so the text can fill up a good majority of this message here. And we have the divider there for designers to utilize if need be to really make that message distinct. And our typography properties stay the same. Our actions still there with the same spacing on those elements. It's just that the width has now changed, and I need to change this to the naming convention of this component as well. So it's desktop. It's a one-line text and action inline for the desktop variant. So I can go ahead and just change that to desktop there, just rename that, and we are good to go. So with that, go ahead and make that a main component, and we'll create the other one from scratch here. So the width for this 3-line element looks like it may be set to 80 pixels. It's not actually giving me that specified height, which is kind of throwing me off. So I'm going to reference that documentation again. Yeah, it's cut off. It's hard to read, but I'm pretty sure it's 80, as that is divisible by 8. So for this 3-line list, let's go ahead and create a new frame and apply the proper surface color style for the background. I'm going to go ahead and grab this naming convention there, and where I'll organize and publish these components. So I've got that naming convention set, and I'm going to go ahead and specify the width to 720 and grab a divider, as that will get all the generic things out of the way. Specify that width to 720. Set the constraints to bottom, left, and right. Then just use my shortcut keys to snap it to the very bottom, as you can see here. And that's good to go. And we just need to double check the height here. Set that to 80. And that divider still stays there as need be. And we can go ahead and add these 2 actions, get those out of the way. So I'm going to copy this text button, paste it, snap it to the bottom and right, and then move it up so the padding on the bottom and right set to 8. Duplicate this and ensure that that is 8 pixels away from the button to the right. Apply the proper constraints here, and we should be good to go with the action buttons. Now we just need to define our 3-line list of our 3-line text string. So I'm going to go ahead and create that, select the body 2 text style, and what we need, I'm going to go ahead, pause this video, copy this text real quick. Wrote out the exact word for word banner message here, and I use the right text style, and I need to actually hold down command and ensure that this text style is wrapping the entirety of this message, and then vertically center it, and then check the spacing on the left here, set to 24 dips. So I have at 25 right now, push that over 1 dip, and we're good to go. And the spacing between here and here and the text box is 90 dips. So what I can do is stretch this out so that it's set to 90. Right now I have 92. Push that over a couple. That's now 94. So now I've moved that over. It's set to 90 now. We have that spacing of 90 between the text bounding box and the actions, which is super important. So now that we have that, we're good to go. We've now defined that. And I'm going to go ahead and create this component. And I'm going to challenge you to building out this last desktop banner message by yourself. So just follow those specs. The height here says 72, just because that's cut off. I know that might be difficult. And then the baseline of this text here is 20 pixels from the bottom, but it's actually just 8. So same specs as we've been doing here for those actionable buttons. Anyways, I'm going to pause the video, make this, and I hope you enjoy this exercise. I've now created that third desktop variant for the banner message, and we are good to go. So now we have this component that designers can now go ahead and duplicate and then start replacing the imagery as needed for the icon placeholder, modifying the typography with the proper text bounding box specified there for this component, and then also the proper placement for these buttons as well to go ahead and modify the text, which is great. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.